Of course. We have a few hours to kill this afternoon. Oh, okay. It's all part of Dorothy. So we're from oh yeah, Westfield was our nemesis. I was on the tennis team, and Westfield had an excellent tennis team. There's a West Side tennis team.
No, I didn't do tennis.
I'm from the touching.
Oh, the touching, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard the touching. I missed the touching.
The touching is the hole in the donut of medicine.
No. What's the touching mascot? Okay. Well, my Rumson Bulldog.
Oh, Rumson has a Rumson Fairhair?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, I changed my and, Rumson Fairhair.
Ladies, gentlemen, would you rise, please, as the family enters? Please be so kind to check your cell phones before the services begin.
Please be seated. Good afternoon, everyone. Certainly good and comforting to be together on this afternoon as we come to remember Dorothy. Before we begin our service, just a kind reminder to silence any cell phones and cellular devices so we can be present here in the space this afternoon. And just a note that this evening there will be opportunity to join together at the home of childhood friend Larry Levine and Allison Bonds in Easton. If you need that address, certainly we can get that to you. I know the family certainly will appreciate friends and loved ones coming to be with them throughout the day to remember Dorothy. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Mourning is the price we pay for having the courage to love others. Even in grief, we know that the wonder of human life is too complex and too magnificent to be memorialized in endless pain. The gifts of spirit that Dorothy offered to us cannot be measured or weighed, nor can they be even lost or tarnished by time. Even in our darkest hours, we know that some of her light, some of her warmth will always be with us, bringing comfort and courage in the fullness of time, healing and peace. We certainly join our hearts together as we remember Dorothy to offer comfort and strength to you, her family. Mourning can certainly be a time filled with many emotions and many memories. We'll begin our service with the recitation of some of our both ancient and modern psalms and writings. I always find it quite powerful that throughout the ages there were those who struggled with loss, and to the best of their ability they attempted to put those feelings and emotions into words. I just wanted to note that a little later on there will be an opportunity for anyone who wishes, at the request of the family, for those who wish to come and share a few memories of Dorothy. So an opportunity to just collect thoughts for just a moment, and certainly encouraged to come and to share some memories of her life and relationships with each of you. We begin with these words from Psalm 23. Adonai ro'i lo ekzar. Binot desha yerbatzeni al mei minuchot yanchaleni. Nashvi yoshvev yanchale b'magalet tzedek lema'an shemo. Gam ki elech begeit samavet lo ira ra ki ata imadi. Shivtecha bintecha hema yanchamuni. Taroch lefanai shulchan neged sorarai. Tishanta b'shemen roshi kosi revaya. Achtov v'chesed yordefuni kol yemei chayai. Shabti b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim. With God as my shepherd, I shall not want. The Eternal makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside the still waters, restores my soul, guides me in straight paths for the sake of God's name. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod, your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. I shall dwell in the house of the Eternal forever. These more contemporary words from Rabbi Alvin Fine. Birth is a beginning and death a destination. Life is a journey from childhood to maturity and youth to age. From innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing. From foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom. From weakness to strength or strength to weakness, and often back again. From health to sickness and back we pray to health again. From offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion. Grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage. A sacred pilgrimage, birth is a beginning and death a destination. Life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. Finally, offer these words from Ecclesiastes. L'kol zman ve'et l'kol chafetz tachat hashamayim. There is a time for everything, a time for every experience under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot the planted. Time to destroy, a time to heal, a time to tear down, and a time to build up. Time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to wail and a time to dance. A time to throw stones, a time to gather stones. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard. A time to tear and a time to sow, a time to be silent and a time to speak. Turning from these words from our tradition to some more personal words about Dorothy at this time. Philip is going to speak first, followed by Lou. Then after that, we'll kind of open up the microphone and the space a little bit to anyone who so wishes to share a few words. And then we'll join back together. Actually, Lou will introduce a cello piece in Dorothy's memory. We'll have an opportunity to hear it together. So I'll turn to you at this time, Philip.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Rabbi. That was beautiful. Thank you very much. What I wanted to talk about was just some general feelings that came to me yesterday on our beautiful drive up from Newark Airport. Well, for whatever reason, the map on the phone decided to bring us up the Garden State Parkway instead of the Turnpike. And so it was unusually scenic. And so maybe that had something to do with it, but basically all that sort of flowed into me was nothing but positive, joyful feelings. Very, very happy. I'm going to dip a little bit into Lewis's space. Possibly, I promise to do it as little as possible. The Yukon girls, who she was very, very passionate about, have had an amazing run. 16 straight Elite Eights and 14 straight Final Fours. That's nothing close to living very well into your 90s. So it's pretty incredible. It's a great run, and we spoke on the phone often, and we came up from Florida to visit, not as much as I would like, but often enough. And the phone calls were always very interesting, and she was very curious and inquisitive. She's asking me to tell her about the interesting cases that I'm seeing down in Florida. I'm a doctor, by the way, if you don't know. And but what I'm so grateful for, and what we also shared, was this incredible passion for music. She and my dad both, had this amazing passion for music, and it certainly flowed into me very, very intensely, and I still feel that today. And then the whole family certainly had a great interest in spectator sports, and so that lives inside of me still as well. So I just feel that she had a wonderful, wonderful life, and she inspired me. She and my father both inspired me to study hard and to pursue what I was really interested in most of all, which turned out to be medicine, and so I'm just overflowing with gratitude and for all that Dorothy and Marie gave me. And so now that she's made it to this end, and will be able to, spend eternity alongside of him, it feels wonderful. It feels just great. So thanks for all of you coming here to spend this time with us. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay. I'm Lou Blaustein, Phil's older brother. And so I like to say that this is a tribute to Dorothy, an operatic life in 3 acts. Act 1. I loved it. So Dorothy was born, the basic stats, November 18th, 1925, to psychiatrist Henry Elkind and psychiatrist's wife, Lena Elkind. And for those of you who knew my grandmother, that's what I'm a psychiatrist's wife. Well, she was born in Cambridge, Mass, and lived in Belmont. And you know, she would get into mischief, and she loved it. I loved it. She almost drowned in a pool when she was 3 years old. Someone saved her, and then she pushed that aside and started like going on jungle gyms and getting into all sorts of mischief. And I loved it. She had her best friend in Belmont, Lois Fish, who only recently predeceased Dorothy. I loved her. She was exposed by my grandpa, her dad, to music early on, piano, and then she took up the flute and she just loved it. And then her brothers, who were older than her, Henry Jr., he was so smart. He was so smart. And Vincent, who was also smart, and a great tennis player. He was a great tennis player, like with that Dorothy enthusiasm, right? And they were, during the Depression, Grandpa was concerned about money, so they were living in Belmont. They moved to Situate, Mass, down on the south coast of Massachusetts, where it was cheaper, and he thought they should have a garden so that they could produce their own food if things got so bad. And she loved it, and Vincent loved the gardening. He tended to the garden, and he loved it, and she loved that he loved it. This is where we kind of part ways. She happened to, understandably, given where she lived, but mistakenly, in my view, become a Red Sox fan. And she used to go, Tony, we know, we'll talk about that later. But she used to go to Fenway Park by herself to watch Ted Williams play on Ladies' Day. It was a quarter. Jerry Levine also has some Ted Williams connections. And then in high school, she went to Belmont High, and then because it was wartime, and her dad was a psychiatrist in the service, and he got stationed or sent to the Eastern Washington, Spokane. She went to Spokane for the last year of high school at Lewis and Clark High School in Spokane, Washington, and she loved it, except for the French classes were not up to par. She did not like the French. French 4 there was like French 2 in Belmont. Then, and she became an accomplished musician all the while. And then Grandpa got sent down to Southern California, so she started her college career at the University of Southern California, which she loved. I love the real Mexican food. she loved playing in the band. She made the point, we made the Rose Bowl, but it was during wartime, so we didn't play in the Rose Bowl stadium. It was played at the LA Coliseum. She made sure that I knew, and of course I knew anyway, because I know this kind of stuff. And then she transferred to pursue music at the New England Conservatory of Music, which of course she loved. And she went to Friday afternoon concerts of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, which were either free or super duper cheap, and she loved it. And after that, after graduating from the conservatory, she decided to pursue music education, and she came down to this area for the second act. Act 2. I never had a bad day with Murray. So she settled in Bridgeport, working as a single woman, as a teacher, music teacher in various schools, and then in the public schools in Fairfield and Bridgeport. And then in 1950, she went to a singles event at the JCC in Bridgeport, and a dentist from Brooklyn was giving a talk on Mahler drinking songs. And like, I'm thinking, because Mahler to me, is kind of depressing and kind of on the dour side, but maybe he had some fun drinking songs. Philip probably knows more about that than I do, because I'm not. Anyway, she goes up to him afterwards, they start talking, and then they started dating, and continued to date, and continued to date, and continued to date. That's Joyce Illowitz right there. She was there through a lot of it, the 8-year courtship, but then finally on April 20th, 1958, they got married. And Phyllis Alkine, my first cousin and Dorothy's niece, affirms that in fact did happen, and she was there. So then I came on the scene February 2nd, 1959. Phil, who you heard from just before, came almost 2 years exactly to the day, January 28th, 1961. And we moved from Bridgeport to Fairfield. And and we grew up together, and we had, as Phil said, a love of sports. We had a lot of arguments around the dinner table because Philip and my dad were Mets fans. I'm a Yankee fan. My mother was a Red Sox fan, so it was good battles. Philip also started to play the cello at age 6, when the cello was taller than he was. And I think his teacher, Ruby Wenzel, she lived over 100, actually, his first teacher. And my dad continued with dentistry. After a time, Dorothy went back to work. And they had this great connection together. I mean, I have seen great marriages, and I'm fortunate to be in one with Lori, but it's mind-boggling to see how connected they were, and through music and shared values. And like she said to me, I never had a bad day with my father. And I can't think of a better tribute. And so, we're growing up. There's so many anecdotes from that I could share, but I'll just say that we were, both Philip and I were blessed with the parental hand that we were dealt, and then my dad sadly passed on Christmas Day of 1993, and my mom continued to love him for the rest of her days. My friend Chuck Forstrom, who's here, he and other friends from high school, Larry Levine, Sherry Stenick, they all, our house wasn't the only place people came, but they came to our house and kind of like Dorothy loved them. And Dorothy knew about their lives and got into their lives. And that also is a tribute. Act 3. I'm up. So after after Dorothy passed, after Murray passed, it was a very rough transition for her. But then she rallied, and she got into a bunch of things. An incredible chapter. She volunteered at the Jewish Community Center in Bridgeport, teaching Soviet Jewish immigrants to learn English. She did discussion groups at the temple at B'nai Israel. She volunteered on political causes, a proud liberal to the very end, and met, in fact, President Clinton on a campaign stop probably 30 years ago. And she kept abreast of like what everybody was doing, and I would do, my friends from Fairfield, my friends from college, then their kids, like Larry and Allison's daughter, Jen. How's Jen? How's Girly? Da 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 da. I mean, always Andy Stark and Hillary and their kids, always, and so she was involved and engaged. And I called her pretty much every day at about 9:30 in the morning for a good 15, 20 years. And it would go like this, okay? Dorothy, you got to get up. I'm up. I'm up. What do you have for breakfast? I had oatmeal. Wasn't any good. What are you doing? Da 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 da. And this was this back and forth that was just beautiful for probably like 2 decades. And then, as Philip mentioned, she did develop this incredible passion for the Yukon Huskies, the women's team, not the men. Like, I would try and talk men's basketball with her, she would get almost physically angry with me. Like, the girls would beat the men. That game is terrible. This game is real basketball. Okay, Dorothy, all right. And Philip will tell you, they, especially during the years when they just were utterly dominant, they would beat teams by 45 points. Dorothy, the next day, we'd go over the game. They could have been better. Gino was not happy with their defense, so she lived at 261 Random Road until 2013 when she moved into the Watermark on 3030 Park and independent living. And independent is a very apt word for Dorothy's existence and life there. And it was, she had friends there. This guy Ernie was a total hoot. Fran Weiss, just throughout, Joyce. And they treated her very well. She was very well cared for. And then in the last 3 weeks, she had a very rough last 3 weeks. But I like to say that she had a very rough last 3 weeks after an eventful and an impactful, 96 years. And I like to think in my own kind of story that, Dorothy stood up for what she believed in. She let you know it. I try and do the same. That came from her. And then, and so now we say we have a coda to the 3 acts. And the coda is called Page Becker's. So Saturday, which was Dorothy's last day, we went to visit, Lori and I did, but first we went to the UConn Indiana women's game, because Dorothy and I would have gone to that game had she been feeling well. So we went. Lori had never been to March Madness before. And we got there, and her breathing was labored, and she was very weak and, kind of coming in and out of coherence. But through that, at one moment she snaps to it, and she goes, "That Azzy Fudd, who's a freshman guard for UConn, that Azzy Fudd, she had a very good game." And that was one of the last things she said to me. And then we went, which is fitting, and then we went home, and then we got the call on Sunday morning. But I, like Philip, feel, a joyousness right now. And so then Monday night, UConn, having won the game we went to, played NC State in a classic double overtime thriller, and Paige Becker's, their incandescent star, and with some help from the referees, won the game. And I'm thinking there was a little Dorothy dust, a little Dorothy vibe to the refs, but on Paige Becker's, and credit to Paige as well. So anyway, that's Dorothy from my point of view.
Thank you both. Thank you. So we'll just kind of open up the space a little bit. If there's anyone that would like to share a few words or a memory of Dorothy, invited to come on up.
Hi, I'm Allison Blaustein, Philip's wife, and I've only known Dorothy for 13 years. And I don't think she was that impressed with me in the beginning. We don't have a lot in common on the surface, but we both loved Philip very much. And for most of my time knowing her, she would just tell me that how much she loved me. And I was telling Philip this morning, her eyes and her smile were, always so full of this amazing intellect and mischievousness, and I loved the mischief, and we laughed a lot together. I just loved her mischievous side, and she really grew to actually love and enjoy the things about me that were different, and I really loved her, and she was very, very special and unique, and she was a wonderful mother. And when my mom met my husband, in all seriousness, she said, "I did not know men like that existed," and that's a tribute to his mom, Dorothy.
Good afternoon. I'm Andy Stark. As Lou said before, I'll be very brief. September 3rd or 4th, Lou will probably correct me, 1977.
Third.
Okay. I was pretty sure it was the 3rd, but had a little doubt. Freshman year at Rutgers University in Brett Hall. And I was actually considered the 3rd roommate because there was a housing shortage. And I had arrived that first day prior to the the grand, the blouse, the Fab Four arrival. Dr. Murray, Dorothy, Lewis, she always called him Lewis, that I can remember,
That's right.
and Philip. And this is 45, so this means that I've known Lou as long as I've known his mom and his brother and his dad, if he were still with us. And I'm in the room, you know, sitting there, and you never know what to expect when your college roommate's going to show up, where he comes from, or are you going to like them, or are you going to get along? And they walk in, the four of them, and it was really Dorothy and her three boys, was the way I always looked at it. And I didn't really think about it in these terms as I look back on it now, but you could see that she was the matriarch, that she was the pillar. And I'll never forget, I have the same amount of hair, but they had a lot more hair. Very wild. I've seen pictures of Philip reminding me that he had this wild, curly black hair, and I think he had braces too. Of course, he was like 16 years old, you know, what can you say? And I think the first thing Philip said to me was, "Are you a Mets fan or a Yankees fan?" And, you know, that's, you know, here we are almost 45 years later. Lou and I decided that we got along pretty well, and we had to figure out how to get the other guy out of the room.
Right.
And when they offered me a chance to move up to the fourth floor, we kind of connived, and Brad Bauman, we kind of said, "Wouldn't you prefer to be up there with that guy than with us?" And obviously we succeeded, and here we are. But Dorothy, I don't think anything I could say is going to be any different than what you've heard already. Very, very strong woman, very clear in what she believed, stood for what she believed. One of the things that I think has trickled down to Lou and Phil is that they're extremely loyal people, as Dorothy was. She was very loyal to the people that she loved. Dorothy, as Lou mentioned, was always very concerned or interested in knowing what our son Tyler and our daughter Avery were doing, how they were doing in sports or athletics. And it's a very powerful woman, and I think it's very interesting. I mean, when Lou speaks of his mother, the relationship their parents had, and that after Dr. Blaustein left us, how she picked herself back up and made quite a impact on her life and those around her, and the things that she stood for, the causes that she stood for. And hopefully we all keep a piece of that in ourselves and maybe follow her example in our own lives. Thanks.
It's a tough day for me. My name's Chuck. Friend of Blouse, it's forever. I grew up around the corner from them. Very different background. But I called her Mrs. B.
Right.
From day one, Philip and I are the same age. From day one, she always welcomed me in their house. Always. She told me she grew up in Massachusetts where there wasn't a large Jewish population where she was. So she grew up with different cultures. She knew what that felt like. She embraced other people for where they were at, and she embraced me for where I was. I always felt part of their family. And she was one of the big reasons for it. She made me feel welcome all the time. And when you hang out at a house a lot, I used to go over to the house all the time. I would say almost every day.
It's true.
It really was.
It's true.
I could go in that house. I didn't have to knock. I didn't have to ask if I could have a piece of Dutch apple cake.
That Dutch apple cake was grandma's.
It was a Swedish bread.
It's
too.
a Swedish bread,
Yeah.
and Chuck is the Swedish boy,
Yeah.
as grandma dubbed him.
But I don't know if you ever had that opportunity growing up. There was that house in the neighborhood you could just go to, and you always felt welcome. That was it for me. A couple thoughts that came to my mind. Whenever I called Philip Bubba, she said, his name is Philip.
She didn't like that.
And over the years, she would pull me aside once in a while and say, is there any girl that Lewis is going to get married to? And you know what? As time went on, I'm glad you didn't hook up with anybody else, because Lori was the girl for you.
Amen.
She was. She was, because Dorothy always had an opinion about Lewis's people he had been dating, and oh, she's a sourpuss, or blah blah blah. But Lori, she loved you,
Oh yeah.
and she was so thrilled that you became part of that family. One last thing, and I became Dorothy changed over the year from being a surrogate mom to me to being a friend. You know, as you grow older, that changes. And about a year ago, I was up helping her with something in her apartment. And as I left, she looked at me and said, you know, I love you. She loved people, man. She just cared about people, and she cared about me.
Yep.
And I looked at her and said, you know what, I love you too. I'm so glad I said that. I hope I can throw a challenge out to you today. Take time to say, I love you to the people you really love, okay? Dorothy, I am going to miss you. But I'll always remember you, and I thank you for the input you had in my life. Peace.
Can you hear me? Show of hands, please. How many full-blooded Italians in here? Full-blooded? Mom and dad, okay. How many professional musicians here? I'm saying professional. Okay, close enough. How many Catholics here? Oh, I have a few. But, you know, I've asked those questions to determine one thing. I'm outnumbered, clearly. I met Philip when he was approximately 8 years old, and I'm about 2 or 3 years older than him, at the Greater Bridgeport Youth Orchestra. In February of 1972, that group went to London for a full week, and Lou has confirmed this. Dorothy came with us as a chaperone. The group needed a bunch of them. Lou and Murray got the better end of the deal because Lou said he got to stay home and watch Knicks games or something like that during the season.
No, he took me to my first ever Knicks
Okay,
game.
right, okay.
So I got
But, right,
that was fine with me.
right, but you didn't play an instrument anyway, so you couldn't have been in the orchestra. You would have just been a kid tagging along. Over the many years that ensued, because the beginning of my association with the Blaustein family is approximately from 1970 or 1971. I know I was in the youth orchestra at that time. Goes all the way from back there your mother told me in much more recent times that your father's favorite composer is Mahler. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. I know very little about Mahler, but I'll start to learn because that's part of the influence of people who are music lovers on people like me. They inspire me to do things like that. I've been a friend of the family for that long, much more frequently in touch with Lou and going to baseball games together and all kinds of other things. Sports, politics, and music are basic categories. And the very last times that I associated with Mrs. Blaustein were solo piano performances at the Watermark because she was living there for quite a time, and I believe I met Philip, you and your wife were there a few years ago, and I'm sitting at the piano. Your mom was right there. So as I sat back there thinking, should I make this little speech or not, something I think that might have been what Chuck said or Philip or whatever triggered in my head. Hey, I go back all the way to my very, very childhood with the Blaustein family. It's just that getting to know the others just took a little time, a little bit later. Correct me if I'm wrong. When a person walked into 261 Random Road, there was a wall there, like a recess, like a bookshelf thing, fairly tall and wide, full of albums, the 33 and the thirds, correct?
Right. And then
Murray's or your mom's, or maybe only his?
it was actually, it was mostly his, but then if you went into the living room, then it would be even more. There were even
Yeah.
more. It was incredible.
Steeped in music. If anything played on a radio or wherever you heard it, and your mom, well, I didn't know your dad well enough and he passed away earlier, but your mom would say, oh, Mozart, Herschel 407. Thank you. You know, something like that. And there were a number of times your mom we did play music together right at the piano. I was sight reading, she knew the music, et cetera, et cetera. So solo piano performances at the Watermark were the last time I saw her. And having audience members who are knowledgeable about music is very important to a performer. I've played many times in clubs or any other venues, and if nobody pays attention or nobody makes a comment, it's like I'm doing it for myself. And every so often at gigs in Bridgeport, if there was no response after a song, I would clap for myself under the table just to hear a reaction. But once in a while, you can have a crowd of 30, 100 people, and one person like Dorothy Blaustein comes up and makes a comment about the music, you know somebody's listening, and it's important. She was not only a performer and a teacher, but also a listener. So that's my little story of an almost lifetime connection with the entire Blaustein family. Okay, thank you.
I'm Phyllis Elkind, and so Dorothy was my father's younger sister. And my cousin Ted is here also, who was the son of the middle, Vincent. So I knew Dorothy my whole life, and she always poo-pooed this, but she was a very important validator for me in music. I took piano lessons, and my parents were very happy that I did and always wanted everyone to listen. But she was the only one who actually listened. You know, everyone else would immediately come into the den and start talking, which is really very depressing. And she would actually listen. And she was also younger and thin and pretty to me and more stylish. So I looked up to her very much. And she had a profession in music. And, but really in this latest chapter, we really became friends. And like Chuck, I'm gonna miss her. I really enjoyed the conversations, and the last time I visited her, which I'd have to look, but I think it's a couple of months ago, she played Chopin for me on the piano, and actually it was a very poignant moment because I'm pretty sure it was this visit, because I think I only saw her once after COVID, that she had, Lois, who you mentioned, was a very close friend of hers, because Lois's family took her on trips with them, and they had a very different kind of just those of you who are saying, you know, you come to the Blausteins where it's different than your home, she had Lois, whose family took her to, I think it was Vermont or New Hampshire. And
Lake Winnipesaukee.
yes, and they were just different. They weren't Jewish, but she had recently hadn't heard from Lois and was trying to reach her, and this is just so sad, learned that she had passed away and no one had called her about it. And that just is, and she mentioned it several times during the visit because it was, just really hit her. And, but she absolutely, to the end, was vibrant. And my music is in the bluegrass world, and she loved that, and she gave me a treasured, beautiful old copy from the 30s of Alan Lomax, the folk music, which is just it takes a long time, there's so much to take in it. And very often when I saw her, she would lapse into, wake up, darling Corey. Well, that was her favorite song. And the first day I called her when she was in the hospital, she was still quite cogent. And the first day, she, so much like my grandmother, had to tell me everything. How are you? The doctor is from India. Do you know that his father was a doctor? And in India, how are you doing? Which she didn't want to talk about. And then it became, she had very rough days where she was really delirious. And I was trying to did she know who I was? And I just, on the phone, said, wake up. And she just laughed, and we just talked, So, I will miss her. She really, it's the end of a chapter for me, but it's not just that. I think she and I really came to love each other late in our relationship. And also, I'm so pleased that my sister, who has been estranged from the family, did speak to her before she took ill. And that really, means a lot to me, and I know to my sister. And I know it meant a lot to Dorothy that Louise called her. So, good family.
I'm Allison Bonds, and Lou introduced me to my husband, Larry Levine. Lou introduced me to my husband, Larry Levine. And I met Larry at Dorothy's house. Now, there are lots of stories about how I met Larry, and as you all know, Lou has a better memory than I do, and Larry has a better memory than I do. So I'm just going to say I went to Dorothy's house, the house that was always open to anybody in the neighborhood, when I was in my 20s, almost 30 years old, and there was Larry sitting on the couch in the den. And she was having a little barbecue for all the boys in the neighborhood, and she had invited me over. I was living in New Haven alone, and Lou said, come on by, and there was Larry with his big flashy grin, his beautiful blue eyes. He says they're green. I don't know. Anyway, and that's where I really remember meeting Larry, was in Dorothy's house, which was just so open and welcoming, and Murray was still there. He left us a year after Larry and I married, but we started having Thanksgiving together at our home in Easton, where the Shiv is tonight and where you're all welcome. And I work at Yale University, and they have the Office of International Students and Scholars. And this is a group that tries to find places for their international students to have an American holiday like Christmas or Thanksgiving. And so Larry and I started volunteering to host foreign students for Thanksgiving. And in the intake form it says, have you traveled outside the country? Well, Larry and his father Harvey would go to China and to Taiwan. And so they always sent us the Asians.
And the Belgians.
And one year they sent us Belgians, who were a hoot. But we always got the Asians. We got folks from China. And one year we had a family of 4 from Japan. I bring this up because A, Dorothy loved the food. And B, she made a point of learning in advance how to greet each foreign student. So she learned ni hao and whatever the Japanese statement of introduction is. And she tried her best to engage with the foreign students whose English wasn't always so good. It was supposed to be passable, but, and in other cases the English was quite good, and then Dorothy would work hard to find common ground between each foreign student and herself. And that just meant so much to me as the hostess, to have someone so engaged with the young people at the luncheon. And they all went away remembering it. And as Lou can attest, Shelley from Shanghai kept in touch with us for years. In fact, she kept in touch with us until Trump was in office. And then she said, I can no longer reach out to you because of your dictator-style president, which I don't mean to bring politics into it, but Dorothy would have agreed 100% that it wasn't a good idea for Shelley from Shanghai to reach out to us during the Trump administration, we'll put it nicely. Dorothy was phenomenally liberal. I don't know if Lou can even attest to all the causes. She was so liberal and so active in liberal causes that her email account was active.
That's right.
active.optonline.net. That means I'm up there, I'm going, and she was always imploring us through her email account to write to our senators and write to our congressmen and women and call the governor and whatever, for whatever cause she was involved in at that time, and it was always extremely liberal. So that's just a few things that I remember about Dorothy. It's certainly not everything. I know she loved the Swedish boy. I know she hated it when we called Philip Bubba, but we still do, even after she's passed. And I love my Lewis. And thank you all. And I love Larry, too.
Hi, I'm Sherry Stenick, and I have known Dorothy since probably Lewis and I were in high school. And in high school, I'd just see her coming and going. After college, I went back to Fairfield, and Lou was coming back often. I don't remember, were you living there then? I think you were living there with your parents. His father taught me how to drive, and I never did take up golf, even though he was so encouraging that it really made me almost want to do it. But Dorothy, the thing about her that I remember is that she was always smiling. She always was happy. She, and not in a pretend sort of way, because there are plenty of people who smile and aren't happy. But she was always like deeply happy. And then the other thing is that she never wanted the spotlight. She never sought out the spotlight. When her boys were there, I'm sure that you saw it differently that day, and the first day of school at Rutgers. But when we saw her, she was busy making hamburgers or getting everything ready for everybody. She was running the show. So the other two, three were there just doing whatever they were doing and enjoying themselves. And so I just remember that she always kind of faded in the background then. And then I went over their home for Passover. My mother and I would come over for Passover, and then we'd have her over for Christmas and them over for Christmas and Easter too. And your grandmother was still alive. And Leah could talk. Grandma Leah could talk. Did I say it? It was Leah, right? Lena. I was close. Okay, Lena, sorry. She could talk. I just called her Grandma, so I don't know. But she could talk. And Dorothy never said a word. Dorothy didn't have time to say a word. So I never really thought she talked a lot until after her grandmother passed. And then it was like she was free to talk. She was allowed. But she was always respectful of her mother and her husband, and then all of a sudden it was her time. And it was just amazing to see her blossom, like you said. She was into all these causes. We were on the Democratic Town Committee together for 20 years, maybe more. And she was just amazing, always on top of whatever the topic of the day was. She's brilliant, but she would never think she was. She was always self-demeaning. And she was just lovely. I'm going to really miss her. And if you want to live to 90, let me just tell you. By the way, Harry Caston, who you played in the orchestra with, his mother is across the hall from my 93-year-old aunt. Today's my aunt's birthday. She's at the Cambridge Manor. They're both in rehab. You have to be independent. You have to be willing to say what you think. And beyond that, take pretty decent good, care of yourself. And if something doesn't go your way, find another way to go. Because that's what, when you said she did this and she loved it, there are plenty of times she could have gone to Washington and said, oh my God, this is the worst day of my life. And the same thing with California. But she never did that. She always found what was the sunny side of the street. So find that sunny side for Dorothy. Thank you.
Well, I've had the good fortune of knowing Lou for maybe 30 years now, from our days back in Hoboken. Lou and I had a common friend that we met through. And I was living with my girlfriend at the time, and Lou would show up on 7:30 in the morning to go running with her. And I thought this very peculiar, that he would be running with my girlfriend, who has since become my wife, and she's back there today. And I only met Dorothy on a handful of occasions, but she was always so bright, alive, enthusiastic, and I wasn't surprised because I met Lou. And I think that whatever else she did in life, she did something very right. And Lou has many great qualities, and I think one of them is that he takes true interest in other people, which I feel clearly his mother did too and gave to him. And so I married my girlfriend and we had children, little tiny things, and they grew into young people. My first son was a violinist, and Lou became very interested in him, and he would come hear him play at Tanglewood. And then my younger son took up the cello, and Lou took great interest in him. And we'd come hear him playing, and we would send recordings to Lou, and then Lou would forward those to his mother, Dorothy, who of course appreciated music. And then she, I was very impressed by this, made the effort to come down to New Jersey to hear our young son play. And this to me is a real act of love. And then the other day, Lou called, and we're always happy to hear from you, of course. And he said, well, I have sad news. My mother passed. And he said that I saw among her papers that she would like Ian Maloney to play at her funeral, if possible, a young cellist. And so we contacted Ian, and Ian's 18 now. He's at Juilliard, and he had a recording session in Brooklyn at this time. And we tried to figure, can we pick him up? Can we get here on time? But we were afraid that if we did, we wouldn't make it. And Lou said, that's okay. But I just felt that there's no greater honor that he'll ever get than being asked by your mother to be here. So.
And I'm David Bozar. I had no idea I was going to speak today, but I heard all you people with your fine stories, and I just wanted to share a few words. I'm a newcomer. I've only known Dorothy for about 13 or 14 years. I knew her initially in a more professional capacity. I was at work one day, and I got a call from Robin Pinkham, and she says, a woman I know who used to be my music teacher when I was a little girl needs someone to help her. So I met Dorothy, and I said, Blaustein, are you related to Ed Blaustein from Rutgers? And she says, no, that's a different Blaustein. And then when we're talking, I found out that her 2 boys went to Rutgers, and she loves Rutgers. And I said, well, I went to Rutgers. And I found out that Lewis and I are in the same grade at Rutgers. And I spent many, many hours with Dorothy. And over time, I kind of adjusted my schedule. So I would do the business, and then I would always tack on another hour because she would like to tell me about Henry and about Lewis and about Philip and her late husband and everyone else that she knew. And she would tell me about Tanglewood and her love for Ted Williams. And sometimes she would play the piano and want me to record it on my phone. And she kept telling me she had to get rid of this piccolo. And I was looking at the online to see how she could sell the piccolo. And about 3 or 4 years ago, right before COVID, she wanted to kind of shift gears and kind of talk about final planning. So she was kind of in the mindset that she was, kind of getting ready for this point. And it was a real pleasure working with her. I was invited to the 90th birthday party from the family, and my wife and I, Lori, also named Lori, went, and it seems we do have a lot in common. One time she was telling me that she had a beautiful graduation with Lewis at Rutgers, and it was outside, and a man named McCormick was speaking. Oh, she going like this. I'm like, I was at a graduation for me, and a guy named McCormick was speaking. And of course, Lewis probably sat on the same row as me. And then I said, Dorothy, I have an old yearbook, an introduction yearbook that they made at Rutgers for freshmen, where if you send them in your high school picture, they'll compile a book of the freshmen. It's probably just something to make money. I don't think anyone ever used it, but I brought it to her one time. I opened it up, and Lou and I are on the same page of that book way back. So it seems like we're all interconnected in a very close way. And in fact, today I spoke with Robin Pinkham. I called her today, and she's not able to come, but she did tell me some stories about Dorothy when she was her pupil way back. And Robin told me that she's 78, so that goes to show you how far back Dorothy goes as a teacher. But it was a real pleasure working with her, and I'd say over time we became very good friends, and I enjoyed her company, and she was always asking about my children as well, and it was a very nice relationship, so I appreciate that.
First of all, thanks to everybody for your words. Incredible, just incredible. One note that I wanted to mention, because all of the talk about Dorothy, most of it musically is about classical music, with the exception of Phyllis's bluegrass American roots music. Dorothy was also progressive in the sense that she liked the Beatles when the Beatles first came out. And in fact, she took us to A Hard Day's Night in the theater at the height of Beatlemania. I think I was 5, almost 6, and my brother was, I was 6 and my brother was, and Philip was 4. And we had to leave in the middle because Dorothy could not take the screaming of the girls in the audience. I later, like 30 years later, I saw the entire film. Okay. Now, because, and Peter, thank you so much for your words, and and to Felicia for getting, Ian couldn't be here, but we have a recording of Ian playing Bach Sarabande, and I think it's a great way to honor Dorothy's request. So I don't know who's doing the AV.
Ian Maloney. Just echo Lou, thank you to everyone who offered some memories and thoughts here this afternoon. And to for that beautiful music, an honor indeed for Ian to have his music played here for us in Dorothy's memory. Music, in fact, occupies a central role in so many stories in the Jewish faith. Many, if not most, of the prolific figures throughout our ancient tradition relied on music to tell their story. For example, Abraham and Isaac were associated with the first shofar, the ram's horn, Jacob through singing, Sarah with the harp, Joseph through the symphony, Moses with the flute, Miriam with her tambourine, David the harp, Solomon the Song of Songs, Hannah and Deborah with their music. The ability to appreciate and bring song and music into the world is an incredible gift. To join together around one's song, around one's music, around their melody, is to awaken the spirit of oneself and others. A gift that, like life itself, moves in endless circles. As marked by the words that all of you offered in this beautiful cello piece, that just moments ago filled the room here. Music, as many of us have shared. I too am a big bluegrass fan. I appreciate that. It was such an important part of Dorothy's world. She played the flute and the piano. She taught music. She studied music. And too, as you had shared, met her dear husband Murray. May his memory be for a blessing, through a lecture about music, a shared interest that the two of them held dear throughout their years of marriage. Dorothy, throughout her life, sang a song with deep passion for the things she cared so deeply about, whether that was music or her politics, Yukon women's basketball, her local civic leadership, for example, with the National Council of Jewish Women, just to name a few. She was a proud woman. She was engaged in life and with the people around her, as so evidenced by all of your words. She wanted to engage with you. She wanted to welcome you in. She wanted to discuss and share about the issues and ideas that she felt were so important and relevant to the world and to our lives. And music is just one way of gathering others in. It is a form, in a sense, of pluralism, like that open door you described of the house. The room can be elevated by and through the experience. It can be describable and indescribable all at once. And ultimately, the experience in Dorothy's life can leave an indelible mark upon all of us, just as Dorothy did. And now, too, in her passing, as so evident here this afternoon, her song continues to envelop our hearts and our ears and our minds as we now turn to the journey of mourning and of grief. And this afternoon, I pray that Dorothy's song and her music, her passion, her curiosity, her kindness, her indelible mark continue to be held closely and dear to all of us who gather here today and all those who had the opportunity to know her. Certainly our hearts go out to all of you, especially Dorothy's sons, Louis, Philip, daughters-in-law, Lori and Allison, nieces, nephews. As you had shared with me and shared today, she was so interested in whatever you were doing, whatever cases you were working on. Certainly so proud of each of you and the lives that you have created and built. We pray you find comfort here among all of these stories that have been shared, all of these memories of Dorothy, of your mom. May Dorothy's song continue to always remain in our hearts, in our stories, and the future melodies that we sing. Zichrona livracha, may her memory be for a dear blessing. And together we say, Amen.
Amen.
At this time, it's customary to rise, if you're so able, for the words of the El Malay Rachamim, the first of two Jewish memorial prayers that will be offered today in Dorothy's memory. El Malay Rachamim, shochen bamromim, המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, עם קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים, את נשמת דבורה בת חיים ולאה בשה שכחה לעולמה, בעל הרחמים ישרך בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, צור בצורך חיים את נשמתה, אדוני הוא נחלתה, תנוח בשלום המשכבה, ונאמר Amen. God of abundant mercy, God most high, may the soul of our loved one, Dorothy Blaustein, who has gone into eternity, find the gift of perfect peace in your embrace, together with the holy and pure whose light shines like the radiance of heaven. Compassionate God, hold her close to you forever, that her soul may be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May she find a home with you, may she rest in peace. And together we say,